I always like adding a little extra Disney magic to every occasion, so today I am making Disney Princess Easter eggs. I had a lot of fun in the fall making my Disney Princess pumpkin patch, and I will link those videos down below. So I really wanted to try and put a little more Disney magic into every season in my home, so I have decided to spread that Disney love into Easter. I'm going to be making quite a few of these eggs and splitting it into a couple of videos, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications down below so you'll get a notification when I upload new videos on Mondays and Thursdays. I bought these brown paper mache eggs on clearance after Easter last year, and they came in a pack of 6, and I bought 2 packs so that I would have a nice round dozen. For the actual decorating, I'm going to be using existing materials that I already have, so a whole bunch of different ribbons, trims, bling, etc., and they're all going to be based on a variety of different colors of acrylic paint. Now, to make them all go together as one sort of cohesive set, I am limiting my color palette ever so slightly. So for instance, I'm only going to use one light blue everywhere. So if Cinderella and Elsa normally would have slightly different tones to their blue, in my eggs they're all just going to have the same light blue, etc., across the spectrum. So after I get the base colors and sections painted on in acrylic, I just need to dig through my ridiculous stash of bling and trims.
The logical place to start when making anything involving the Disney princesses is Cinderella, so I'm starting with a nice white acrylic base coat. Next I'm going to start working in the white, and that's going to cover pretty much everything except the sort of white panniers on the sides of her dress. A second coat isn't always necessary here, it depends on what colors you're using and how good their coverage is, but in this case the light blue is pretty thin, so having the white underneath was very helpful. I just mirrored it from front to back so that it will have a peak coming up into the white on 2 sides. Then I went back over the white section with a silver glitter paint. Because can you ever have enough sparkle when you're talking about Disney magic and princesses? Then, to represent her headband, I put a piece of white ribbon going across the top blue section. For her choker, I used a piece of plain black vinyl cut into a narrow strip. I pressed it down as flat as I could with my fingers, but with the round shape of the eggs, it wasn't as smooth as I would have liked. I'll come back to that later, but for now I'm putting a rhinestone on either end of the headband. Now, to smooth out the black vinyl, you can use an X-Acto or a utility knife and just sort of cut into any of those thick lumps that come out. That made 2 flaps of vinyl, so I just pressed one down flat against the egg and then the second one down flat against the previous one. Then I just kept repeating that, working my way around the egg until I was pretty happy with how flat it was laying all around. Next, for Rapunzel, I started with a lilac layer of paint all over the egg. Then I put a pink band about 1/3 of the way down the egg. For the next step, I wanted to represent her little slashed puff sleeves, so I'm doing these sort of triangular little wedge shapes, alternating pink over the lilac around the top section of the egg. Then I took this floral glittery tape, I think it's meant for scrapbooking, I'm not really sure, this was given to me, and I went around the egg, snipping it here and there so that I could sort of bend it down to lay flat around the egg. Next I took a piece of gold tulle and cut 3 even strips. Then I tied each strip together at one end with a narrow strip so I wouldn't get a thick, bulky knot, and braided these 3 strips loosely together. I made sure to give myself plenty of braid because I wasn't sure how much I was going to want, exactly where I was going to be placing the braid. Then I glued my first end of the braid to the top of the egg, played around until I decided where I wanted to place it, and glued it down to the egg. When I got back to the top, I knotted that off and then cut off the excess. I I glued my new knot down, kind of near the first one. Then, to cover up the knots at the top and to represent the braids in Rapunzel's hair when all the little girls get a hold of it, I took all these tiny little pink rosettes, put a bunch of them on the top to cover up the ugly part, and then just scattered some randomly throughout the entire braid. Next, for Belle, I started with a sort of golden yellow. This isn't metallic, this is a flat color for the base coat. Then with a metallic, I painted a series of scallops around the egg and did several tiers of that. I gave myself a few little dots as sort of guide points to connect to keep things relatively even going around the egg. I did 2 that were just the individual swags, and then the bottom one I went ahead and filled the entire bottom of the egg in with the gold metallic paint. Because again, I can never have enough sparkle in my life. I didn't worry too much about getting my points super duper sharp and perfect because I am going to end up covering those over, so they didn't have to be exact. Then I put a drop of glue on the point of each swag, and then covered each of those drops of glue with a red crystal to represent the enchanted rose. This was one of the simpler eggs that I made, but I think it's really pretty all on its own, so it's fairly obvious to me what character it is, but even if you don't know that it's supposed to be Belle from Beauty and the Beast, I think it's very pretty. Now I'm moving on to Mulan, and for her I'm going to paint the top third or so of the egg with a nice pale pink. Then I'm going to paint the rest of the egg with a nice royal blue. I feel like Mulan is a little bit harder to get on her own, but when you see this egg with the whole series, I think it makes a lot of sense and it's pretty obvious who it's supposed to be. Then I took a strip of white satin ribbon and glued a little V pleat into the front. Once I tested to make sure that it would fit nicely around the border between pink and blue, I went ahead and glued that down. I made a similar V in the back and cut the edges off, but this time I didn't bother with a pleat. I just wanted to sort of get the ends cut off nice and fairly neatly. Then I took a strip of fuchsia bling ribbon and wrapped that around the middle of the blue section to sort of represent her waistband. Then I glued a fuchsia satin ribbon flower to the very tip of the egg and put a jade colored rhinestone at the very tippy top of that. And that finishes up Mulan. Next I moved on to Tiana, so I have a sort of pale sage green sort of color for her base. Once that was dry, I went over the entire egg with the same silver glitter paint that I had used on Cinderella. I tried to reuse materials when I could from one egg to another to sort of tie them all together thematically, but you don't have to do that, just whatever floats your boat and makes you happy. To decorate the painted egg, I cut a strip of the silver bling tape down to be nice and narrow at just 2 rhinestones wide. Then I took some scrap floral wire and cut 3 strips of it down with a little curly Q at one end of each strip. That's going to represent her little crown. I arranged the 3 of them together nicely and wrapped the ends together, leaving one little piece sticking down at the bottom so that I can apply that to the rhinestone bling tape. Then I glued the strip of rhinestone to the top of the egg and wrapped it around the length of the egg and cut it to length. I left the second end hanging loose so that I could poke the floral wire in through the hole of the mesh. And I happen to have this adorable green dragonfly patch that I think matches perfectly, so of course I had to use it. I think it made a nice finishing touch. Moving on to Jasmine, I painted the entire egg a nice bright turquoise. Then to represent her crown, I went around with a narrow gold metallic painted strip, bringing it down to a point in the front. Again, I sort of went around with a couple little dots to make myself a nice, fairly even guideline of Once her tiara was painted, I scattered some random dots of glue around the top section and put on some turquoise rhinestones. Of course, I decided that first set wasn't enough and had to add some more. Then for the blue stone in the center of her tiara, I happened to have a matching heart-shaped crystal, so I put that in there. Then I put some gold dots scattered evenly around the gold tiara section and added some gold crystals. I feel like Jasmine was one of the simpler eggs that I made, but I really like the amount of sparkle that she had, and even though she's fairly simple and graphic, I think it's pretty obvious who she is, and I think it's adorable.
So here's my first half dozen Disney Princess Easter eggs. I hope you found this helpful and inspiring. If you did, please like down below. Remember to subscribe because I have another half dozen princesses coming next week. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.